The Krasnodar Trial was a war crimes trial that was held in front of a military tribunal between July 14 and 17, 1943 in Krasnodar, within the Russian Republic of the Soviet Union. All of the defendants had been Soviet citizens who collaborated with German forces. All 11 defendants were accused of treason for collaborating with the Nazi German military, police and SS forces, which were responsible for implementing the occupation forces' policies during the German occupation of Soviet territory. This trial was the first war crimes trial of World War II. The German Wehrmacht occupied the Russian city of Krasnodar between August 12, 1942, and February 12, 1943. German forces killed approximately 7,000 civilians in those 6 months, including Jews and communists. Shooting, hanging, burning and gas vans were used as methods of execution. The tribunal heard the case against 11 defendants, all of whom were Russian and Ukrainian collaborators with the German military, police and SS forces. They were accused of participating in the murder of 7,000 people. All but one of the defendants had joined Sonderkommando 10A, a subunit of the death squad, Einsatzgruppe D. The only exception was Mikhail Lastovina, a kulak who had managed to avoid capture during dekulakization, a campaign initiated in the early by Joseph Stalin in the 1930s to eliminate the rich peasants. Richard Duoc, commander of the German 17th Army, Kurt Krissmann, the head of the local Gestapo, and 13 other SS officials were also charged in absentia. The prosecutors emphasized the collective responsibility of the Nazi regime for the crimes, not just the local commanders. All of the accused pleaded guilty and begged the court to spare their lives to have a chance to atone. They were all found guilty and sentenced on July 17, 1943. 8 of the defendants were sentenced to death. The other 3 were deemed to have had relatively minor roles and were, instead, sentenced to 20 years of hard labor in the Soviet gulags. The following morning, the defendants who were sentenced to death were publicly hanged together in the Krasnodar town square. Approximately 30,000 people, including children, watched the executions. Many of them are said to have started applauding their deaths. The Soviet press gave wide publicity to the trials. Foreign observers considered the trial stage-managed. The British journalist Alexander Worth called the trial first-rate hate propaganda that was intended to emphasize the suffering of Soviet civilians under the German occupation. That said, nobody doubted the severity or the extent of the crimes or the guilt of the defendants. Even in the Soviet Union, some noted that the massacre of their 7,000 civilians in Krasnodar was actually a relatively minor incident in comparison what the Germans and collaborators were doing in other places in the Soviet Union and Europe, but the main objective of the trial was to deter future collaboration.